What are the most interesting domino effects in history? One of the very best stories I ever read on here was this one, originally written by Jeffrey Widders and posted 2 years ago by /u/shaky2236. A ship of Cuban immigrants sinking leads to America invading Iraq. Such examples are common in history, but this is so vivid and unpredictable that I have to mention it. November 21st, 1999, a boat carrying a dozen Cuban immigrants trying to get to Miami sank. 2 of the passengers were a young boy named Elian Gonzalez and his mother, Elizabeth. Elian survived the sinking, but his mother did not. If he had drowned, or if she had survived, most of us would never have heard of this story. But he survived, and was rescued by fishermen, and brought to Miami. At this point, the story becomes an international incident. Elian was taken in by relatives in Miami, but his father still lived in Cuba, and wanted him back. What would usually be a simple custody issue, which the father would almost certainly win, was complicated by 50 years of Cuban-American relations. The large Cuban-American population in Miami has extremely negative feelings toward the Castro government in Cuba. To them, including Elian's relatives, sending the child back to Cuba was unthinkable. But the law pretty clearly gives parental rights to the father. The US government ordered that Elian be returned to his father. Elian's American relatives refused. The situation, while technically peaceful, was incredibly volatile and could turn violent at a moment's notice. The Border Patrol sent in an armed team to storm the house and take an Elian back by force. No one was hurt, but armed government agents storming a home to seize a child played very badly in the media. This incident gave then President Clinton a serious political black eye, particularly among Cuban Americans, which group is largely concentrated in Florida. It just so happened that was an election year, and Clinton's vice president, Al Gore, was running to replace him. Clinton's political troubles ended up being passed on to his would-be successor. The 2000 election was one of the closest in US history. The US electoral system is set up so that whoever wins a state gets all the votes for that state. Florida is a big state, and its votes ended up deciding the election. Al Gore ended up losing the state by an incredibly thin margin in an election that remains highly controversial. Which means that George W. Bush became the 43rd president of the United States. It's highly likely that, had the Elian Gonzalez incident never happened, Al Gore would have been president. The consequences of a presidential election are numerous, but there are some very clear ones in this case. Less than a year into Bush's first term, the World Trade Center was destroyed by terrorists. Both Republicans and Democrats agree that Gore would have responded different to the attacks. Naturally, Republicans insist he would done much worse. Democrats insist he would have done much better. Most obviously, while Gore might have still attacked Afghanistan, it's a near certainty he wouldn't have invaded Iraq. So, had Elian's boat not sank, or had his mother survived, Saddam Hussein would still be in power. 4,500 Americans and 100,000 Iraqis would still be alive. Several hundred billions of dollars would not have been spent, and ISIS would likely not exist. At the same time, President Obama was elected primarily in response to the unpopularity of the Bush administration, so there's no way of knowing who would be in the Oval Office now. A single human death is more than a flap of a butterfly's wings, but the consequences of it are enormous. In 2004, during the halftime show of the Super Bowl event, Justin Timberlake and Janet Jackson were performing, and somehow Janet's nipple got slipped. This made big news. 3 guys working for PayPal heard of this and tried to find a video clip of it online, but they had no luck. So they quit PayPal, and they decided to create a video streaming website. That site was finally created in 2005, and it became known as YouTube. The Senate of Rome decides to kill the Gracchi for pushing through legislation in favor of land redistribution. Marius then revives this issue to pay his troops back for winning so they could resettle in Italy, which causes Sulla to start a bloodbath in Rome, killing thousands. Sulla leaves his dictatorship, and Rome goes right back to squabbling between the rich and poor. Julius Caesar takes up the mantle of Marius and the Gracchi again, and succeeds in the reforms. Caesar conquers Gaul. That and his controversial land law causes hardline conservatives to oppose his coming home without being put on trial. Caesar crosses the Rubicon. Pompey goes to Greece. Caesar defeats Pompey. Caesar becomes dictator. The Senate stabs him and flees to Greece. His adopted son Octavian raises an army to fight the assassins. They win. Antony and Octavian go head to head. Octavian wins. Octavian, now Emperor Augustus, has 350,000 troops and we are having land redistribution, if you don't fucking mind. The fall of the Aztec and Incan empires, caused in part by the conquistadors, led to massive reforestation in areas that were once designated for cities and farmland cleared for crops/animals. This led to a massive fall in carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, which brought about around 200 years of excessively cold winters in Europe, leading to a mini ice age which ended around 1750. As a boy, Satoshi Tajiri liked to run around in fields and meadows and catch and collect different insects. As a young man working for a video game company, Satoshi learned that the fields and meadows he used to play in were being developed for urban purposes. Realizing that many children are never going to have the same experiences as he did, he decided to create a video game that simulates going around in tall grass and catching and collecting bugs. That video game is now known as Pokemon. When Margaret Beaufort was a baby, the king promised her father she could inherit her father's wealth if he would fight in an upcoming battle. If something happened to him, he fought and was taken prisoner and died. Margaret got that fortune and was determined it would pass through her lineage. A few decades later, King Richard passed a new law that said a woman's wealth passed to her husband, not her descendant. Margaret was by this time on her third husband and had an only son by a previous marriage, and the thought of her husband inheriting her father's legacy instead of her son pissed Margaret off. Margaret was a lady in waiting and that gave her access to a lot of information. She started conspiring with Elizabeth Woodville, mother to the princes in the Tower. They conspired to overthrow the king, making a deal that Margaret's son and Elizabeth's daughter would marry. They gathered support, passed on secrets, and that led to Margaret's son, Henry Tudor, killing King Richard and establishing the Tudor dynasty and the British monarchy eventually being stable enough that they focused on other things like exploration. British officers in India during the 18th century were eating quinine powder to treat their malaria. The powder was so bitter they mixed with their club soda. They brought it back to the UK and they started putting it in their gin. Hence gin and tonic. Also resulted the discovery that quinine can be used to treat rheumatic diseases. That's why when you've autoimmune arthritis you get put on antimalarials first, such as hydroxychloroquine. I also think a nice G&T helps when you're flaring. Takes the edge off the pain. The domino effect of the media/movie streaming industry is fascinating. Netflix starts as the DVD mega business. They try to get bought out by Blockbuster, but Blockbuster doesn't make the right offer. Netflix gets into streaming. Blockbuster's entire business collapses. Now there are a handful of companies competing for the space that Netflix revolutionized. In the early 20th century there was an issue of humidity in printing press rooms causing the ink to run. A man named William Carrier invented a dehumidifier to suck the moisture out of the air, and it worked. The ink dried faster and stayed dry, and as an unseen side effect it kept the rooms cooler too. Thus the precursor to the modern air conditioner was inadvertently invented. At first it was only used for industrial purposes, and it wasn't until after WW2 that smaller units were manufactured and made readily available to the public. This led to a huge migration of city-dwelling folks from the north to more rural areas. Conservatives retirees were settling in the south without having to worry about discomfort from the heat and/or heat-related injuries for the elderly. This caused a huge shift in electoral college votes from north to south. Another side effect of air conditioning was when it started being put in movie theaters. Before, being crammed in a room with a bunch of other sweaty people to watch a movie just wasn't enjoyable. Once theaters could be cooled, it became way more popular to go to when it was sweltering hot outside. Thus, the summer blockbuster movies became not only a device for entertainment, but also a way for pop culture to shift the political climate. During the Vietnam War there weren't very many pro-military movies, since the general population was pretty much against the war. It wasn't until George Lucas came out with the Star Wars trilogy that people were able to enjoy heroic stories of battle and triumphing over evil. It was around the second Star Wars movie that a man named Ronald Reagan was campaigning his plans on how to deal with the evil empire known as the Soviet Union. The Democrats, in an attempt to make his missile defense plan sound silly, dubbed it Star Wars. This had the opposite effect because people thought it sounded cool. People also resonated with the rebels trying to overthrow an oppressive government the same way that Ronald Reagan was taking on big government in America. In 1980, Ronald Reagan was elected president. So in an effort to keep ink smearing on the pages of newspapers in the printing press room, it set off a domino effect that led to Ronald Reagan being elected 40th president of the United States. Wait, so there's only been 5 presidents between Reagan and Trump? Apparently America loves its 2-term presidents. Fun fact, there are 45 presidencies, but only 44 people who were president. Good old Grover Cleveland. Not American, PLS explain. Grover Cleveland is the only president to have served 2 non-consecutive terms. As a result, he is counted as the 22nd and the 24th president. Join the Discord server for literally nothing in return. Link in description.